This is Illinois in Focus, a production of America's Talking Network. I'm Greg Bishop. Coming up, we'll review the week's top stories about the latest movement on lawsuits against Illinois' gun and magazine ban, lawmakers returning to Springfield, and the cost of energy. We'll also get commentary from the Center Square publisher Chris Krug and executive editor Dan McCaleb about those stories and more. That's ahead with Illinois in Focus, a production of America's Talking Network. Listen to all our podcasts at americastalking.com. I'm Greg Bishop.
Hello, I'm Katherine Mincer, a family farmer raising corn and soybeans in Christian County, Illinois. It might be hard to believe, but 96% of the farms in Illinois are owned and operated by family farmers just like me. Our job is to grow the healthiest, most affordable food around to feed my family and yours. Meet more farmers just like me at www.watchusgrow.org/corn.
A message from the Illinois Corn Marketing Board.
This is Illinois in Focus, the production of America's Talking Network. I'm Greg Bishop. Here's some of the top stories from the past week. It's been a month since Governor J.B. Pritzker enacted a ban on certain weapons and magazines, and the challengers stacking up lawsuits and temporary restraining orders. Macon County Judge Rodney Forbes heard the case in Decatur Friday, brought by State Representative Dan Calkins, Decatur Jewelry and Antiques, and around 2,100 other plaintiffs in the group Law-Abiding Gun Owners of Macon County. From the Capitol in Springfield Wednesday, Calkins celebrated the TRO and said it's the first step in a continued legal fight.
Well, this is a temporary restraining order. We have to go through the process to get a permanent order, but this is the first step. It's a big step, and we look forward to our day in court, which, we hope will be very, very soon.
The TRO from Macon County is the third such order from a state court in 4 weeks.
We now have a patchwork of TROs and 2,000 or 3,000 people that are covered by the TRO. Not fair to all the rest of the citizens.
Calkins' attorney, Jerry Stocks, said they plan to take the case to the next step for statewide action before the next scheduled status hearing, March 20th.
Our next step would be moving for the declaratory judgment attacking on its face, which is part of our alternative relief that we did not move forward on, but that we filed the motions on already. And we will not wait to March 20 for that.
A slew of federal challenges still pending. Illinois State Rifle Association Executive Director Richard Pearson said the courts have been inundated with challenges and people are furious.
They are put upon, they are diminished. They feel that their rights have been taken away. They feel like the government has stomped on them, and they're not happy.
Their case could be combined or consolidated with several other federal lawsuits. Todd Vandermeide said that the gun dealers have a separate lawsuit, taking a different approach.
We are, arguing about parts, repairs, and those kinds of things, as well as a bit more on the right to sell, because don't forget that the way this bill's written right now, we have FFLs that have guns in for repair that do not believe they can return them to their owners.
After last year's U.S. Supreme Court ruling in a New York case challenging that state's gun laws, a new precedent was set. Vandermeide said no longer are courts to balance public safety with fundamental rights. Instead, he said, courts are to rule on the text and tradition of the Second Amendment as a supercharged right.
Courts around the country are taking the New York decision, which some call Bruin, to heart.
Several recent federal court rulings in other states found gun prohibitions for people under civil domestic orders or people who consume cannabis are unconstitutional. The ripple could be felt in Illinois. Democratic State Representative Justin Slaughter, who chairs the House Judiciary Committee that held hearings on a gun ban before the measure was ultimately approved and enacted, he sees the way courts across the state and the country are going.
We'll be sure not to kind of step on the toes of what the judiciary and our courts are going to be embarking upon. But we certainly want to continue to have the conversation.
In Illinois, several state-level courts have issued limited temporary restraining orders against the state's gun ban. More action in state and federal courts expected in the days ahead. Ameren, Illinois says the transition to clean energy is behind price increases proposed to the Illinois Commerce Commission. Kevin Bessler reports.
The company is asking for over a $160 million gas rate hike and a 4-year, $435 million electric rate increase. Tucker Kennedy is a spokesman for Ameren, Illinois.
As we bring on more solar and wind energy sources onto the grid, it's our job to make sure that grid is able to handle those new energy sources.
Abe Scar, Illinois Director for the Illinois Public Interest Research Group, says every penny Ameren is asking for should be scrutinized.
I'm a supporter of the clean energy transition and think electric utilities do need to make investments for that. But just because that's what they say doesn't mean they should have a blank check and they should be able to raise rates as much as they want.
Scar says Ameren customers have been hit hard by rising bills of late. The company projected a more than 25% increase in energy costs for customers this winter. I'm Kevin Bessler.
With those prices increasing, Republican lawmakers blaming the governor for aligning the state toward more alternative energy sources. Andrew Hensel has more.
This week, Ameren, Illinois said that they are looking for rate increases due to the state's switch to renewable energy. The Illinois Freedom Caucus, made up of several Republican lawmakers, said Pritzker's politics are to blame. State Rep Chris Miller leads the caucus.
It's just another attack on the middle class and seniors on fixed incomes. Electric bills have been exploding under Governor Pritzker's radical agenda to destroy Illinois.
State Rep Blaine Wilhauer says these increases are also hurting businesses in Illinois.
The Kincaid Food Market in Kincaid, Illinois is closing its doors for good. They're closing because of the actions taken right here in this General Assembly on energy policy.
According to Save On Energy, Illinois households pay an average monthly payment of $125.58 for their electricity bills. I'm Andrew Hensel.
Illinois has become the third state to mandate employers provide employees with paid time off for any reason, but now there are groups lobbying for more paid time off. Kevin Bessler has details.
The Illinois Time to Care Coalition is urging lawmakers to pass the Family and Medical Leave Insurance Act, which would create a statewide insurance program that allows workers to use up to 26 weeks of paid leave. State Representative Sonia Harper is the bill's sponsor.
If women in Illinois participated in the labor force at the same rate as women in countries with paid leave, there would be an estimated 124,000 additional workers in the state.
Chris Davis, Illinois Director for the National Federation of Independent Business, says the legislation would be a burden on small businesses.
Not only pay an employee while they're out, not working for a business, but in addition, potentially having to pay an employee temporarily to fill in that gap.
Only 11 states and the District of Columbia have paid family and medical leave laws. I'm Kevin Bessler.
And legislation that could help the Chicago Bears finance a proposed stadium development in Arlington Heights by freezing property tax assessments for decades is getting a thumbs down by the governor. Kevin Bessler reports.
A bill has been filed that would allow up to 40 years' worth of tax breaks to major organizations like the Bears. Governor J.B. Pritzker says taxpayer funds should not be used to help the Bears build a stadium.
I honestly do not think that the public has an obligation to fund in this major a way a private business.
Americans for Prosperity Illinois State Director Brian Costin says they conducted a poll that clearly showed that residents don't want to pay for the Bears' new digs.
They don't like corporate welfare. They think that everyone should play by the same rules and no one should get special benefits that might cost other taxpayers money.
Team officials have said they would not seek public funding for the stadium itself, but they would need help to complete the rest of the multi-billion-dollar project. I'm Kevin Bessler.
Those are the top stories from the past week from Illinois. Find more online at americastalking.com. Coming up for Illinois in Focus, commentary from the Center Square publisher Chris Krug and executive editor Dan McCaleb. This is Illinois in Focus, a production of America's Talking Network. I'm Greg Bishop.
Freedom and liberty are important to all of us in Illinois, from Rockford to Carbondale, from Quincy to Decatur. If you're looking for civil, intellectual conversations with those shaping the future of freedom, try the Future of Freedom podcast with me, Scott Bertrand. We speak with leaders across the country in the greater conservative and libertarian movements. In-depth conversations about where the next intellectual battles will happen across the country. It's the Future of Freedom podcast. Find it at americastalking.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, and welcome back to the Illinois in Focus podcast. This is the Crosstalk segment, commentary powered by the Center Square. I'm Chris Krug, president of the Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square, joined by my friend and colleague, the vice president of news of the Franklin News Foundation, and the executive editor of the Center Square, Dan McHale. Danny, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Chris. It's a Super Bowl Sunday weekend. Are we allowed to say that on the air, or do I have to say it's the big game?
I think we're journalistic about this, right? It's, Yes, it is the Super Bowl, and it's Super Bowl 58. Does that sound right? Can that be?
I can't keep track of the numbers. I'm anticipating a pretty good game though.
When the Roman numerals went past 20, I kind of started to be able to, or stop being able to pace it. I want to hop right into the news with you if I can. You know, we have a full array of stuff to talk about today. If you've been reading the Center Square over the last couple of months, which I hope that you do, you know, at thecentersquare.com, this issue around guns in Illinois has been very much forefront, you know, for a lot of people. The freedoms here in the United States and the freedoms in Illinois are somewhat in conflict legislatively. And there have been a number of lawsuits in the wake of the gun bans and the magazine bans that were put into place at the beginning of January during the lame duck session. That just really
Actually, we're recording this on Thursday, February 9th. It'll be the 1 month anniversary tomorrow, Friday, February 10th, of the law being enacted.
Why does it feel like this has been I don't know, this has been going on for like months and months and months. It's just, but we're 1 month into the legislative action and the governor signing this gun ban. There are cases that are out there, and if you're trying to make sense of this, you know, and you're struggling with it, don't worry. You know, we're going to try to simmer this down into like easy pieces to understand. Let's talk specifically though about what's happened within the last couple of days here. The state gun ban has been subject to a temporary restraining order. It started with maybe it was like one plaintiff or a couple of plaintiffs, and then it grew to a few hundred. And then since then, other people have been signing on, and now there are an additional 2,100 people who are now at this point. Can I say exempted? What's the right way to look at this from the gun ban order?
Yeah, so there have been there are several lawsuits, both in state and federal courts. 3 state courts to date, with the third coming just yesterday, Wednesday, February 8th. 3 state courts have issued temporary restraining orders against the government from enforcing, essentially prohibiting the government, state government, from enforcing these bans on the named plaintiffs. Yesterday's lawsuit, where a Macon County judge issued the temporary restraining order, affects the 2,100 plaintiffs in that particular lawsuit. So it's not a statewide TRO against the ban. It's just for those who put their names in the lawsuits. So we're now up to about, if you include the other 2 lawsuits, the 3 lawsuits where the state courts have issued temporary restraining orders against enforcement, we're up to about 5,000 plaintiffs. But to date, there has been no statewide temporary restraining order that's been issued. Attorneys that have brought lawsuits are trying to get statewide TROs in place, but that just hasn't happened yet. None of the federal courts to date have taken action yet. So those lawsuits in federal court alleging Second Amendment violations, Fifth Amendment violations, et cetera, those have yet to be heard, but those are all pending. So it can be confusing because these lawsuits have been filed in different courts and different jurisdictions. There's probably up to about 10 lawsuits now. 3 of them have had preliminary rulings that essentially all 3 judges in those cases have ruled that the new law violates equal protections under the law, because the law doesn't affect everybody. Police officers, both current and retired, have been exempted from the law. Those who work in various private security agencies or roles, they have been exempted from the law. So it carves out people who the law affects, and all the court said that violates citizens' equal protections rights.
Right. Right. Yeah. And so there, there's what's going on inside of Illinois, but this debate is raging across other states as well. And I really like Greg Bishop's story from earlier this week about what's going on in New York State. And so, last year, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in a New York case that challenged the state's gun law that the courts are to balance public safety with fundamental rights, right? I mean, that kind of became the standard, right? And so, what's happening in Illinois has not been subject even to Illinois Supreme Court, right? I mean, this is being, again, you've got possibly more than 10 cases. I mean, we're aware of 10 that are out there that are sort of independently being filed and then heard. But even in New York, where the gun laws are as liberal as the new gun law that was passed here in Illinois, that there are limitations, and that it would be reasonable to think that what has been passed here in Illinois is probably not going to slide because a standard has been established. Yes,
because there's precedent been set by the U.S. Supreme Court in other states, and that's what makes this so complex, I guess, or tricky. Ultimately, I have to think anything that these Illinois courts decide is ultimately going to wind up at the U.S. Supreme Court, unless the U.S. Supreme Court rules in another state's case, in another state that has put strict restrictions on gun ownership. The Supreme Court could rule in any of these other states' cases that they're just clearly unconstitutional, and that would have set precedent and have impact on the Illinois cases.
Yeah, and so I mean that's something that we're going to be following. I mean, for the benefit of people who are listening to us here in Illinois, I mean you're probably familiar with the Center Square, Illinois, but the Center Square is a national newswire service, and we do cover things in other states, all 50 of them. Actually, and the federal government from our Washington D.C. bureau. So we're going to continue to pay close attention to this. I think this is on the mind of a lot of Illinoisans. And again, the speed at which that moved through the legislative process during lame duck was like everything else in Illinois that's big. There's not a lot of discussion around it. You don't have all the facts presented to you as a citizen, simply because of the speed at which this stuff moves. And then it becomes a matter of like, what does this law mean, and what does this law, mean to me as a citizen? We're just doing our best to try to make sense of this for the benefit of the people that read the Center Square.
Real quick explainer for first time listeners, the law that went into effect a month ago essentially bans the sale of more than 170 semi-automatic pistols and rifles that the state legislature and Governor Pritzker deemed assault weapons. Those are their words. Certainly gun rights advocates say most of these guns that have been banned aren't assault weapons. And as you said, magazines that contain more, or that can hold more than 15 rounds of ammunition for handguns and more than 10 rounds of ammunition for rifles. So that law has been in effect, but there's been plenty of legal challenges on many constitutional issues, including, of course, the Second Amendment. And if and when the U.S. Supreme Court says, hey, all of these laws in Illinois and New York, California, and elsewhere, they violate individuals' Second Amendment rights, then that would have an impact on Illinois' law.
Illinois cannot make laws outside of the U.S. Constitution.
Correct.
Try as it might.
That is correct.
So someone who made a lot of laws in the state of Illinois was former House Speaker Michael Madigan, who
made a
served
lot of laws and blocked a lot of laws.
Yeah. And he roughly served for I don't know what 4,000 years, somewhere in the neighborhood of that. So of course, he's under federal indictment, for what amounts to be corruption charges related to. Well, I don't know if I could read the entire list, because I mean it sort of reaches into a few different directions. But nonetheless, one of his you could color in the circle for me there, Dan. But one of his confidants, Michael McLean, who's a former state lawmaker, was a longtime lobbyist, and like as I said, it's like one of his closest confidants. He has asked the judge in his corruption trial, McLean's corruption trial, to bar any evidence related to an alleged rape that occurred in Champaign. And this was documented in an email that has been widely reported. I mean, this has been part of evidence, right? And that has been widely reported for, like 2 years now? I mean, has it been out there in the open?
Yeah,
But wants to keep it away from the jury, and this is specific. Of course, McLean is specific to the AT&T corruption deal. So what's the latest on this, Stan? What do people need to know?
Yeah, so Madigan himself doesn't go on trial until next year. McLean is scheduled to go on trial this spring, and what his lawyers filed, essentially a brief with the court that's going to oversee the corruption trial of McLean and a few others. They filed a motion with the court saying this email that McLean sent. This dates back to the former Governor Pat Quinn's time in office. In this email that went out, McLean vouched for a longtime state employee who was facing a disciplinary hearing because he kept his mouth shut about an alleged rape that incurred involving a state employee, and also ghost payroll practices. Ghost payroll practices are when people don't go to work, but they're still getting paid. And we're talking about taxpayer money here.
Yeah, no-show jobs on the taxpayer dime, and maybe they work somewhere else, or maybe they've got another no-show job and they're just beneficiary of corruption.
And what this corruption trial against Madigan, again, Madigan's not in this specific case, but what it alleges is that close allies of Madigan, AT&T and ComEd and others, were giving Madigan allies unpaid jobs, essentially putting them on their payroll in exchange for Madigan ushering through legislation that was favorable to these utilities. That's the same allegation of McLean. McLean was Madigan's right-hand man, and the government alleges that he was working with Madigan to get these no-show jobs to allies of Madigan in exchange for Madigan getting legislation through favorable to these utilities. AT&T and ComEd have already admitted they're essentially in agreements with prosecutors. They've already admitted to wrongdoing here, and McLean and his attorneys also don't want that presented as evidence at the trial. So they're doing the best to keep some of the state's evidence out of the trial. That the jury that's seated won't be able to hear these things. And it's a typical defense practice.
Of course. I mean, if you bar evidence, then the jury has to make sense of it from what? I mean, testimony. Yeah, right. And the leftovers probably would resonate largely as hearsay. I mean, unless there's somebody that actually comes forward and dimes them out. But even if that does happen, then that's it's like one person's word against another. I mean, this is the documented settlements that the federal government has with AT&T and ComEd are the corruption.
Yes.
So if you take the corruption out of a corruption trial, what do you have?
Well, I'm sure that prosecutors have. I would assume we don't know the prosecutor's case, and certainly in total, but I would assume prosecutors will bring ComEd and AT&T officials to the stand. What McLean's attorneys don't want is them to admit that these two companies, in agreements with prosecutors, admitted their guilt already.
Fascinating stuff. We will stay with that story. Obviously, I mean that's it's big news across the entire state of Illinois. AT&T, ComEd. I mean, two of the biggest public utilities, that operate inside of the state of Illinois. And you're talking about the ramifications of this corruption. Illinois taxpayers are never going to be made whole on what happened. It's the rates that they got, and it's like everybody except the taxpayer has won until this point. So this is really about
holding people, public officials, accountable.
Yes, sir.
For their actions.
That's it. That's exactly right. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about sort of legislative stuff. Legislature's in session in Springfield. Things are happening. We try to sift through that and find the stories that we think that are interesting to people. And Kevin Bessler this past week wrote a story about paid leave in Illinois. And so Illinois has one of the most worker friendly and frankly business owner stringent. Is that the right? Would that be the right word? Business owner unfriendly
yes.
Laws around family and medical leave. And I mean, of course, people need to be out. They need to be out. And I think that the vast majority of small business owners that I know are inherently they're generous with the people that that work for them, and they do the very best they can to ensure that they support their families outside of the law. I mean, outside, they're not operating against the law. They're doing this willingly, right? And so, but nonetheless, there are laws that are in place that mandate certain things, and it appears that in 2024, Illinois will become the third state to mandate that employers provide employees paid time off for any reason, but that may not be good enough. That there's a group out there that is pushing for more. So what's going on with this story?
Yeah, so in legislation that's already passed, as you mentioned, in 2024, businesses, both public and private, will be required to give all their employees a certain amount of paid time off. Illinois will be only the third state that mandates that. This would include part-time workers, for example. But there's a new bill that's out there that would essentially create a statewide insurance program by charging businesses more in taxes, payroll taxes, that would allow workers to use up to 26 weeks of paid leave in a year. Now, I think I remember from third grade math that there's 52 weeks in a year.
Almost every year.
Almost every year.
Almost every year, 52 weeks. Yeah.
And doing the math in my head, that's 26 weeks. That's I think that's half a year. Yeah, so you could theoretically, if this becomes law, and this is not law yet, but if this becomes law, theoretically, hey, I could do this podcast every other week instead of every week.
Oh, don't do that to me. How you feeling? You look good. I haven't mentioned that lately, but you're looking good.
I'm feeling good. Thank you.
Your bench press back up to 400 yet?
I'm getting there. I'm crossing the 150.
Love it. That's awesome. Gains, brother. So I mean, if you if this goes if this goes through and you're running a small to mid-sized business, this could really just blow a hole right in the side of the boat. I mean, some people may need this, but the way that this law is written, the for any reason part is like, how? How could you operate a business under that circumstance?
It would be particularly small businesses, that maybe have 10, 12, 25 employees. What if 5 of those employees wanted to take advantage of this at the same time? You can't operate your business that way.
No, it absolutely makes no sense. What's next on this? What should people be looking for, listening for?
Well, so technically the legislature, the Illinois legislature, both the House and the Senate are in session, but they've been canceling session days left and right. Next week is when Governor Pritzker gives his State of the State / budget address. And that's when really the committees, the House committees, the Senate committees start getting to work on legislation. So this is going to for this to get to Governor Pritzker's desk, it's going to need to get through committee hearings, and then the full House is going to have to pass it, and then the full Senate's going to have to pass it. But let's face it, the House and the Senate have supermajority of Democrats in charge. So something like this, it's not necessarily out of the question that it would pass. It seems like you wouldn't want to hamstring job creators, the folks that employ Illinoisans, by passing something like this. But who knows with this legislature?
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? And will it be publicly discussed? I mean, will it? Will there be an actual, informed conversation where the public is made aware of the points of view around this? Will the small business owners in the state of Illinois be given an opportunity to say, hey, whoa, hold on a second. This is what this law, and frankly, if you're listening to this, you're like, well, that doesn't sound like that would be great for me. Well, yeah, but I mean, how does the business survive something like that? I mean, how many businesses are set up that there's just, especially now with the economy the way it is? I mean, businesses are leaning up and trying to, and at the same time, most small and mid-sized businesses are not cleaving off their workforces like the tech company. I saw, we're taping this, as Dan mentioned, on the 9th of February. Disney Corporation is axing a whole bunch of people. In the last X number of weeks and going back into last year, virtually every tech company in the country cutting people. Most small and mid-sized businesses run at an appropriate staffing size to ensure that there's a little bit of cushion for the business to continue to operate and for everybody to have, and that's to the benefit of everybody in that environment. That makes sure that the job that you go to each day is going to be there next week, right? And so they want to put that, when I look at this, they're putting that security in jeopardy. That needs to be discussed.
There's no doubt. And groups like the Illinois Chamber of Commerce and the Illinois Manufacturers Association, et cetera, have said Illinois' past current laws that have been in place for years, are overly burdensome on them. And that's why Illinois lags when it comes to new job creation to its neighbors and states across the country, because Illinois already has a business unfriendly environment. This would, we haven't begun hearing from business groups yet. We just reported it this week. But as news of this bill gets around the state, you can bet there's going to be all kinds of backlash to it.
One of the things that concerns me about not just the legislature here in Illinois, but I think legislatures across the state, and this comes down to voters and the decisions that voters make, right? It's like, I don't think there are enough questions asked about who these people are and what they do and what their actual perspective is. that voting in the United States has largely become, well, I'm a Democrat, so I'm going to vote for the Democrats, or I'm a Republican, I'm going to vote for the Republicans. In bills such as this, the biggest question is not whether or not the person is a Democrat or a Republican. Shouldn't be. It's, have I sent somebody to Springfield that has some wherewithal? And one of the biggest gaps that I've seen among the people that are sent to Springfield, who Illinoisans elect, is that there's not a lot of business savvy down there. There are not a lot of small and mid-sized business owners and operators who make their way to Springfield. And that's understandable, because maybe they're not able to run, because the part-time job that pays you whatever it pays you now, what, $85,000 or $90,000 a year. I mean, to put your business at risk to go and do the people's work, regardless of that pay, that might not be a good trade-off. So I think what you get is people that, frankly, in my opinion, could not earn $85,000 in the private sector doing anything, going down and making decisions that affect people's lives in ways that they would have no idea, would not understand, because they've never made a payroll. They've never had to operate a business. They've never had to think about anybody but themselves, like a small, mid-sized business owner has to.
Yeah.
And so they make decisions like this.
Yeah, that's a shame. I who knows what's going to happen in this, the Democratic with its Democratic supermajorities in the House and the Senate. But I've got to think that if this gets a fair hearing, or fair hearings as it should, that there is going to be multitude of pushback against it, because it would be so unfair, particularly to small business owners.
Yeah, I would think that some of the lobby organizations that would represent the interests of small business owners, if not all of them, would be coming into the breach on this one, and it'll be interesting to see who takes up the other side. Dan, we talked a little bit earlier about the corruption trial for Mike McLean, and we did reference the ComEd corruption story. He said, I think if you live north of, I guess probably north of I-80 is kind of where the cutoff is for ComEd. Maybe ComEd goes a little farther south than that. Maybe it goes a little farther west than that. Than 39 or whatever. But ComEd is sort of like, when we talk about energy in the state of Illinois, ComEd is sort of the 800-pound gorilla. But Ameren covers an awful lot of the state, the energy provider Ameren. And they have gone to the Illinois Commerce Commission and are asking for a $160 million natural gas rate hike, and a $435 million electric rate increase. And so that's a lot of money. I mean, almost $500 million on electricity, and $160 million on the gas side. What's going on here?
Well, you and I are both served by ComEd, not Ameren. But I assume, like me, you pay your electric and gas bill every month, and I assume most of our listeners pay an electric and gas bill. And if you do, you know that this winter, oh my God, the price to heat your home has exploded.
I got to tell you this: I accidentally paid my gas bill from last month twice because I got a bulletin, from my bank that said, "Hey, this is due." I'd already paid it, and I paid it again. And it was like, you talk about punching yourself in the face. So yeah. I guess I'll have a credit, but nonetheless, I mean.
So anyway, getting back to the Ameren's request for a rate increase, essentially they blame, they say they need it because of lawmakers and Governor Pritzker's push for green energy, and their push to have only renewable energy in place in the state of Illinois by 2050. Well, that means all kinds of infrastructure issues, of course. So things like solar and wind energy aren't anywhere near ready to supply power statewide for everyone. So it takes all kinds of investments. So as high as your energy bills are this winter, Amaron says it needs more because of the policies that Governor Pritzker and Democrats in Springfield have already pushed through.
Yep. No, I watched the State of the Union and President Biden, and then the rebuttal from Arkansas Governor Huckabee Sanders on Tuesday night. And during his portion of the program, President Biden said that we'll probably need fossil fuels for at least another 10 years. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess we're going to have to get going on this and here in Illinois, because geez, we only have about 10 years left.
Yeah. I just looked this up. Actually from Kevin Bessler's story. I didn't realize it was that steep, but it's steep. Energy bills in the winter of 2022 increased 25% already over 1 year's time. Between 2021 and 2022, energy bills in Illinois increased by 25%.
Right. And meanwhile, in that same period of time, the dollar that you had in your pocket a year ago at this time is worth about 91.5 cents.
Yeah.
So that's fun. It's, you're getting less for more, which is always a great value proposition for a customer.
And you're getting hit on all sides. Food prices are up like 14% a year.
I know.
Over a year. It's crazy.
I know. I mean, it's like, I like to do my part, do a little bit of grocery shopping for the family. I go every week. I take my youngest with me. We try to make it a math exercise. I'm like, no, put that back. Go find the one that's the lowest price per ounce, or blah, 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 blah. And she brought over a dozen of eggs last week. And I was like, okay, hold on a second. Let's go over and take a look at this. She brought the white eggs because we normally buy the white eggs. And it turns out that the organic eggs were less. And I'm like, well, I'm not a big fan of the idea of, the organic idea. I think it's largely baloney, right? But we want to buy in the organic eggs because they were less.
Yeah.
But less, marginally less. So instead of $5.99 a dozen or $6.29 a dozen, they were $5.79 a dozen or something, which is crazy. I mean, they used to give you eggs. I mean, for crying out loud, like through the customer loyalty program, because they were 99 cents a dozen.
You've got to wonder how some households are surviving this inflation. It's the taxes they pay in Illinois.
It's not good for anybody. No. I mean, it's not good for anybody, and it's disproportionately affecting, the middle class and the lower middle class and poor people. Yeah. I mean, it's just what's going on in the country, in the state, and you know what? Why isn't that forefront issue in Springfield? Well, I mean, isn't that what the people of the state of Illinois really need to be? I mean, if you're serving the interests of the people of the state of Illinois, shouldn't that be pushed to the front? Shouldn't we be having discussions and trying to figure out, and legislatively, remember, legislatures can go both ways. In Illinois, we just add new laws and add new regulations. We don't take regulations off. We don't repeal laws. It's always just more laws. And last year, how many laws did the state of Illinois pass last year?
Oh, I know that there's thousands of bills that are filed. That is probably close to 1,000 or more a year in and year out. And the Democratic Party claims to be the party of the little guy, the ones who can't rise up and speak for themselves. All these policies are hurting the little guy. Increased energy costs, increase food costs, and there's a push for electric vehicles in the state of Illinois to get rid of gas fueled vehicles. Eventually, have you shopped for? Well, you know cars much better than I do. Electric vehicles are so much more expensive than gas powered vehicles. How is a little guy going to afford it?
I'm going to just talk about that just real quick. right? Because I mean, we just talked about this whole energy thing, right? Where they're asking for more money for clean energy. Here's the deal: the vast majority, I would think 90. I'm winging this, and if I'm wrong, and if there's somebody out there that says, "Oh, hey, you're absolutely wrong about this," but it is my understanding in the state of Illinois that 90+% of the electricity that we used that is not generated by nuclear is generated by burning coal. And so that's not clean, and that's not going away. You could put up a gazillion windmills and we could have solar panels on everybody's roof. Of course, the manufacturing of solar panels really comes down to having a relationship with China, which, they just floated this balloon over the United States. I don't know that we're exactly where we need to be. We're pushing ourselves toward a solar and wind powered future. Well, the solar part of it, we don't have the technology, the capability, or the capacities to build solar panels ourselves. So I'm here in the United States. So I don't know how that makes any sense at all. So if you look at these things in like little boxes in a vacuum, this idea of green energy, it's terrific. The reality of it is that electric car that you're running on is being powered by electric that's made largely, from coal, and coal's not clean. So you could virtue signal your way, all the way down the highway, at least 200 miles at a time, before your car runs out of juice. But you're burning fossil fuels to make that work.
Yeah. I don't know. It just, yes, there should be a move toward cleaner, renewable energy. You have to take baby steps. You can't just expect it to happen overnight or in a few years' time. President Biden, as you referenced, his comment that we'll need oil and gas for about 10 or at least 10 years is really laughable. If we're still, yeah, right. We could go on and on about energy.
I won't torture you or the listeners any further on that, and we'll pick it up some other time. Last thing, Dan, and then I'm going to ask you, how the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl. So the Illinois Board of Higher Education, these are the state universities, right? They're asking for another 7.7% in spite of enrollment drops. And enrollment here in Illinois is going to continue to be a challenge because the neighboring state universities and even some private schools are more competitive on price for Illinois students. The Illinois Board of Higher Education has proposed a fiscal budget of $2.5 billion. So in addition to the revenue that they would collect from paying participants, willing participants in their university system, also known as students, they need $2.5 billion of subsidy to make it fly.
Yeah, and that's a 7.7% increase over what they got last year, despite, as you mentioned, declining enrollment. If you're serving fewer students, why do you need a 7.7% increase in what state taxpayers provide you? It doesn't make sense, and it's another example of big government wanting to be bigger.
So when you look at that, I mean on a cost per person basis, so it's $2.5 billion, okay, and there's how many students, Dan? 183,000.
Yeah, 183,000, down from about 184,000 last year.
So what are you talking about? Like $14,000 of subsidy per student, plus whatever they pay?
Your math skills are better than mine. Is that what it is?
I might be off there. I might be off there, but I mean, 14. I mean, it's like $13,600 per student, plus they pay what they pay.
Plus they pay and they pay higher tuition than most neighboring states' tuition as well.
And they're taking loans on that.
Yeah,
to get degrees that don't pay for themselves. Like, when are we going to look at? So here, right? Last lick on this. I don't think there are a lot of Illinoisans that think we're doing such a hot job educating people. Certainly not at the K-12 level and at the state level, right? We tend to think of ourselves as, in Illinois, or our leadership in Illinois purports us to be like a high tech, up and comer. I don't see it.
Yeah,
I don't see it.
Well, you and I have both talked about our children who are of college age had decisions to make when they were, in their senior year of high school, and both of mine and your oldest, who's college age, all chose to leave the state of Illinois to go to universities elsewhere. Yours has graduated and hasn't come back, and I don't know. I don't want to speak for her, but
no interest. Zero interest expressed thus far.
And both of my college age students, one in Alabama, one in Texas, have expressed no interest in returning to Illinois. Of course, they're going to come back for breaks and summer or whatever, but after they graduate, they're going to be looking for jobs elsewhere.
Dan, it's always a pleasure. As always, I've enjoyed it.
Don't you want my Super Bowl prediction?
Yeah, let's get it. Tell me how the Eagles are going to win. My wife's from Philadelphia, and so this is only possible to go one way, or the next year will be very, very difficult here.
I am picking the Eagles, but I think this game could go either way, particularly if Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes is back to close to 100% after his high ankle sprain. But Philadelphia's got a great defense too, so I'll put it somewhere in the neighborhood of 27-24 Philly. But I won't be surprised if Kansas City wins either.
I like where your head is on that. $16 billion projected to be wagered nationally on this game, legally.
I am not going to be putting any money on this game. I think it's a tight contest. I'm not that much of a gambler anyway, but just be smart and safe if you're going to gamble.
Yeah, please, let's do that. Honestly, gambling is so prevalent, not just here in the state of Illinois, but like across the country. Tap the brakes. Seriously. Come on. Stay within your means. For Dan McHale, this has been Chris Krug. You've been listening to the Illinois in Focus podcast. This was the Crosstalk segment, powered by the Center Square. Now over to Greg Bishop for a look at what the Center Square Illinois will be working on next week. 3, 2, 1. We've run out of time here on the Illinois in Focus podcast.
Next week, lawmakers return to hear from Governor J.B. Pritzker, who's set to deliver his State of the State and budget address. The team from the Center Square will be on the ground to bring you the very latest there and continue to track litigation against Illinois' gun and magazine ban and more. This has been Illinois in Focus, a production of America's Talking Network. I'm Greg Bishop.